Hi guys, today I'm here with Sarita, the CEO of Maria01, the leading startup hub in the Nordics based in Helsinki. Hello Sarita.
Hi, Julia. Lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too. So this is our first time seeing each other, but after like small introduction that we did before the recording started, we already know that it's gonna be a really lovely conversation. I believe that. So as Sarita mentioned already, my name is Julia and I'm the community builder at Startup Hub Poland. And today we're gonna talk about the Nordic startup ecosystem, Helsinki as a growing innovation hub, and what startups can actually gain from building in Finland. So are you ready? Can we start?
Absolutely. Let's start.
Awesome. So just to have a little warm up, Sarita, could you tell us a bit more about Maria01 and the idea behind building such a strong startup community in Helsinki?
Absolutely. So as you already mentioned, so Maria01 is the largest startup hub in all of Nordics. We're one of the largest ones in Europe as well. And actually, this was not built very intentionally since the very beginning. It was more the community that actually built this. It was sort of built by the community already since the very beginning. And the idea back in 2016, when we were founded, this year we're 10 years old. So the idea was that Helsinki needs a place where we can all gather. The whole startup ecosystem can gather under one roof, or actually 6 roofs these days. So we happen to have this old empty hospital campus in the center of Helsinki, and then the city was kind to start offering that to our use as well, and this is where we've been ever since. But the idea was that when everybody comes together, then we're able to do even greater things, and that the ecosystem has like a new heart where everyone can gather. And Maria01 has been the heart of the ecosystem ever since.
Cool. So it's basically sound like a little bit like as a startup hub Poland. Basically, we started 14 years ago, also as like mostly just a community with like an idea basically to help startups, but mostly like to talk with them how to start or something. And right now we are also like one of the biggest startup hub in Poland. So that's and our part of Europe. So that's we have similar stories right now, which is surprising because like Helsinki is often seen as a smaller ecosystem compared to like cities like Berlin or London, but many funders describe it as one of the most efficient startup hubs in Europe. And what do you think that makes Helsinki unique?
I think there's actually quite many factors to it, and it's really a clear fact that our ecosystem is much bigger than one would imagine for the size of the country. We have almost double the amount of startups per capita in Finland comparing to the European averages. So it's quite a remarkable data point as well to show that Finnish people love building startups, and we have a very, very active and very vibrant ecosystem. But I think there's a couple of things that's probably like have contributed to this, that why this has developed in such a way. So of course, kind of to begin with, Finnish people are typically quite highly educated. We have a lot of engineers in Finland. We have a very strong kind of engineering background. And we also have, of course, this sort of a very kind of the kind of a culture that we help each other to do things here. So I think that has kind of helped the startup ecosystem to grow. And one of the things that I often refer to as well is that one of the advantages that we have is that we actually have a very small internal market. And this might sound very counterintuitive, because of course one would imagine that that's actually a disadvantage. But I think for us, it's definitely an advantage, because then that means that for the Finnish startups, the whole world is our market. So that means that we have to go to global markets, have to find product market fit there at a very early stage as well. So I think that has also contributed to the growth of the ecosystem. Then, of course, we've been very lucky that the public sector in Finland has been very supportive towards the startup sector and has really seen that this is the field that will generate the growth in the future as well. So therefore, we have different kinds of, startup permits, different kinds of grants from the public sector side, which then has helped the ecosystem to develop as well. Of course, in Maria's story, the city of Helsinki has been quite elemental and as well since the beginning. So it's all like kind of those points coming together. But then, of course, jokingly as well, we have really, really long winters, so we have a lot of time to spend indoors and build new solutions. So maybe that has also helped.
Yeah. So nice. So we can strongly agree with the saying that actually Finland already became a major startup ecosystem, right? You're growing really big lately. So you mentioned that you have also like help from public sectors and everything. But is there anything else that has changed in the most recent sorry, do you think that the most in recent years, like what changed more?
I would say that everything has changed. I've been working in the startup ecosystem for well over a decade already, and I think I've seen a massive change in that. That when I joined my first startup job, late 2014, early 2015, that was when the startup ecosystem was still at very early stages, and nobody really knew how to build companies. We were basically, everyone was doing everything for the first time. We were building great companies, and there was a lot of startups being founded, but it was really early stage still. But now over these past 10 years or so, a bit more, what I see that has really happened is that our ecosystem has matured significantly, meaning that we don't have like kind of just first-time founders anymore. We have second-time founders, we have third-time founders, we have serial entrepreneurs. We have our first founder factories in Finland as well, which I think is amazing. So, for example, the startup that I joined back in the day was called Smartly. Smartly grew to be one of the very big success stories of Finland. And Smartly is one of the very first founder factories that we see here as well. So, for example, on our campus here at Maria, we have a lot of my former colleagues, former Smartly alumni who have then founded companies. And there's been, I think now then probably the number is even higher already, but there's been over 100 companies that the Smartlys have founded around the world. So it's really a clear sign that when you're able to build a company like the Smartly founders were, that is able to have the kind of a culture that really embraces ownership and kind of encourages people to take action. So that kind of thing then develops the ecosystem as well a lot further. And another point that I see how the ecosystem has changed is that whereas in the beginning, I would say 99% of the people had their background in either engineering schools or then in the economy side, business side. And now it's so much more diverse. So during my career, I've been very often the first woman or one of the first women to kind of do those jobs where I've been in the startup ecosystem. But now I see that the field is much more diverse, that we have founders from different backgrounds, different genders. We have different kinds of education backgrounds, for example. That it's no longer kind of an exception if you come from somewhere else, but we have nurses founding startups, we have teachers founding startups, and of course then a lot more female founders, a lot of people in different ages as well founding startups, which I think is great because those are all signs of like a maturing ecosystem in general.
Great. So it's the fields are expanding all the time, basically. That's awesome, which is interesting because, for example, from our point of view, when we are talking, each time that we're starting acceleration programs on our side and everything, we can see that within the years, the ideas are changing, and right now we're getting so many options from med startups to fintech startups to cybersec and everything. And before it was mostly like for example cybersec ideas, which is interesting because we have a really great IT people here in Poland and they're growing really big, but when we are starting each round of our, for example, Poland Booster program, we're seeing how much people are expanding their possibilities, which is amazing. And I'm so happy to hear that it's happening all over the Europe, that people are able to be more open right now to start something new than, for example, with what we are attached to. So as you said, more in Finland there was like engineering stories, and right now you have almost everything, which is really great. When I was preparing for this interview, I had like discussions with my team about how they think the Nordic startup culture and everything. And most of people at my team said that they believe, because that's the way how we think the Nordic sector, that it's associated with trust, collaboration, and low hierarchy. So people are super equal. And do you think, maybe we are wrong, but do you think that this shapes the way startups grow internationally?
No, I think absolutely, and I think your team is totally right in all those points as well. If I first talk about the low hierarchy, I think that's been one of the things that is really one of the key principles in all the startups here. During my startup career, for example, we only started using different kinds of titles when it makes sense to the customers. So like inside the company didn't really make kind of a difference what was your title or kind of how kind of were the roles defined. Customers in different markets more wanted to know that who is the director now and who is this and that and so forth. But I think in Finland, typically the low hierarchy has really helped the companies to grow because you don't really have such barriers inside the companies or between the companies and the investors, for example, that you as someone in a maybe not so decision making role, you could not reach out to another person. But in here, everybody's very easily approachable. And for example, here at Maria, at our lunch cafeteria, we have the top ranking investors at the same time there as all the startups, startup founders and so forth. And they even go to the same sauna shifts as well. So it's a very, very kind of easily approachable community. And then maybe about kind of the collaboration and the trust, I think that really shows in the give back culture. So we have a very, very strong give back culture here, which I kind of referred to in the previous answer as well. That's one of the really key things, I think, why I, for example, love working in the startup ecosystem here. And what I think is one of the strengths of our ecosystem is that even those founders who are some of the most successful ones, have built like such amazing big global companies coming from Finland, they all want to dedicate their time to helping the newer founders to succeed. And this is, for example, one of the cornerstones of our Northern Light Accelerator program, which, by the way, is still open if there's anybody in Poland that would like to apply.
Maybe asking for that too, but thank you for the small introduction.
So one of the key kind of things for that program as well is that we have as mentors some of the most successful Finnish startup entrepreneurs as well, and they are all participating because they really see it valuable to help the kind of the new generation of founders to succeed. And that for us, of course, is something that we're deeply grateful for, but that also helps the startup ecosystem to grow.
That's actually really great, and I have to admit that it's so hard to find people these days who, even when they're super successful already and super busy, still finds the time to for like meet, with small entrepreneurs and kind of give them some tips how to get into that world and everything. And as we like watching the many businesses that we are working with and how people are expanding, when they already getting more successful than of course at the beginning, they trying like kind of not being too supportive as they used to be before. And it's so great to hear that we can you're still meeting such people, which is a really great great thing. And so glad that you told about that, because maybe our Polish entrepreneurs would like to expand their businesses also to the Nordic sector, and maybe learn something from your amazing from your friends from the business. Let's call it like that. Okay, and well, beyond funding, actually, because you already mentioned the Northern Line program, which I guess you funding the startups at it. What do startups actually gain from building maybe like not only in Helsinki but the Nordic region?
Sure. Just about the Northern Light Accelerator still, so we are not funding the startups.
Okay.
There's a lot of investors in our community who are, of course, like carefully always looking at the startups that we're bringing to Finland as well, or that are coming to Finland through the program. But the focus of the program is really to help the foreign startups to find the product market fit here in the Nordics or in Europe, depending on where they come from, of course. But what do the startups in general gain from the Nordics if we think about startups that are coming from outside of the Nordic region? I think Nordics as a whole, especially if we talk about the new Nordics, so including the Baltics as well, it's quite a big market area with a lot of very, very kind of early adapter people, in the sense that Nordic people typically are quite tech oriented. So whenever there's new technological solutions, there's typically quite a lot of interest in testing new solutions as well. So I think Nordics works as a very, very good kind of platform for that. And then also as kind of comparing to the market size, so the Nordics as a whole is quite a decent market on its own already as well in terms of the population. And then of course, for example, for a Polish startup to expand here, then we of course see that, for example, Finland, Helsinki is very well positioned here in the center of the market if we think about the new Nordics area and the other Nordic countries as well. So we have very good connections and very short kind of connections to, for example, Stockholm and Tallinn, for example. So in that sense, we're always really happy to welcome the startups here and of course helping them then expand in the market as well.
Great. Well, you kind of answered my other question, because I really wanted to ask you how it's like looking in your perspective. So what currently makes the Nordic ecosystem attractive for international funders and investors? So we already found out a little bit, but maybe you would like to add something else besides.
Sure, absolutely. I mean,
and great role models.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, the fact that Sweden has had such a big AI boom, so that has brought everyone's eyes towards the Nordics. We've really seen it in the last couple of years that there's more and more international investors looking at the Nordic region, partially because of the AI boom, obviously, but I think in general, Nordics as a whole has a very, very good track record in generating these really, really big tech companies, very exciting products that are taking over the markets around the world. So obviously investors look for the different ways to actually kind of support those big companies and make money with them. So in that sense, I think the Nordics is a perfect place for that there's per capita quite a lot of unicorns, a lot of centaurs as well. And we, for example, here in Finland, we have the goal that we would like to have 100 centaurs, so 100 companies that make over 100 million as soon as possible. There's currently 19. So in that sense, this region is producing a lot of those success stories and therefore makes sense, for example, for the investors to have a look at. And then, of course, when it comes to kind of industries in general, so then obviously, especially if we look at for example, defense technology in Finland or biotechnology in Denmark, or now everything AI related in Sweden. So I think the Nordics is becoming quite a hub for different areas, and a lot of this very, very high tech, like for example, quantum has been very big in Finland as well with IQMs and Q2s and so forth. So so there's a lot of these different focus areas in different parts of the Nordics, and they are all the kind of solutions that solve the problems of our time, the big problems of our time. So that kind of goes well hand in hand with the Nordic idea as well on kind of focusing on problem solving, focusing on kind of making sure that we all have a planet to live on in the future as well.
Super. That's so great. Okay, now I will let myself move more into like funders, international growth, and see connections. So we talked already a little bit about the connections with other European countries, but are you seeing like stronger connections today between Nordic and Central and Eastern European startup ecosystem, including Poland too? Like maybe something changed within the last years or something? Is it like more connected, or you still like sticking more to building this with other Nordic region countries?
Well, Maria 01 has had very strong international connections since the very beginning. We have different kinds of partners, whether they're hubs like ourselves, like yourselves, whether they're governmental actors as well, or other kinds of partners around the world. So we've had partners in practically almost all the continents for a long time. But one of the things that has been actually quite interesting, that while we have had a lot of like the more traditional Nordic collaboration, we have not had a lot of collaboration with our Eastern European partner fellows. And that's something that we've been now focusing on changing as well. So it's actually quite funny that, for example, Estonia is just across the Gulf here, and we haven't had a whole lot of relationship with the Estonians before. I mean, obviously we meet each other at events all the time, but there hasn't been like kind of something more structured, and the same with you in Poland. So that's something that we've recently started focusing on changing as well, that I think, especially of course, when we talk about the European sovereignty and European unity and all that. So I think it's even more important that we are kind of in good connections and we form those relationships. But then at the same time, I really see that as I visit different ecosystems around the world in general, I see that us in Eastern Europe, we have a lot of similarities and very similar mindsets and very kind of this go-getter, get stuff done kind of an attitude. And I think there we could get a lot more done if we work more together. So hopefully we'll have a lot closer relationships in the future.
So to all of our viewers, guys, like you see, we are super open about other collaborations. So feel free to reach out to Sarita and other Maria teammates. So that's a great thing. Okay, and I would like also ask your like more personal question. So in your opinion, what distinguishes founders from the Nordic region today?
In what way do you mean?
In what way?
Yeah, in what way distinguishes from what?
How to explain this to you?
Like, do you mean like how Nordic founders are different, or?
Yeah, like what, like mostly like yeah, exactly. How they are more different than others.
Yeah, I think what's typical for Nordic founders is that Nordic founders are often quite resilient. That is something that I think comes from the Nordic heritage, in the sense that we, of course, like Nordic countries are well known for the work-life balance, but when you're a founder, you don't really have a work-life balance. But typically, you're quite well equipped with the kind of tools that how can you balance the stress and those like tougher moments that inevitably come when you're founding a startup. So I think that's one of those kind of areas. Then I think also the Nordic founders in general have this mentality that while the Nordic region or each one of the Nordic countries is quite a lot smaller, so we've been international since the very beginning. Like our generations and the younger generations have always been used to kind of interacting a lot with different countries. We speak a lot of different languages as well. So in that sense, that kind of positions us quite well to grow businesses outside of our own countries and outside of our own region as well. And I think therefore probably there's also, I mean, if we don't talk about the obvious things like education level and so forth, so I think those things most likely are the key things for the Nordic founders to succeed.
Well, thank you for reading my mind, because I spaced out for a moment, but yeah, that's exactly what I meant by asking. And because, well, I have family in Norway. Just like super not important fun fact, but I can see the differences right now, how, for example, they're raising their kids as I was raised basically in Poland. And this is exactly what you're saying, that basically people not changing that much within what generation they are, because they're having the same values for the for many years, and that's something that you should be really proud of. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of jealous of that, because I can see that every single time I'm meeting someone new who is like younger than me or older, every single person that I'm like, you know, is being around me, they're having completely different mindset. And the way I'm seeing, like, you know, my family who lives in Norway, and the kids especially, because they are, you know, from the day they were born there, they like exactly the same as others. So and they have the same values, which is really amazing. So thank you for that answer. I will maybe move right now to another question. I'm gonna skip it because we already talked about the interconnections and stuff like that. So, what startup sectors of trends basically are currently getting the most attention across the Nordic ecosystem? Because we already mentioned that, you know, more engineering stuff, but already like you have a various like scope of projects and everything, but maybe there are like some trends that are currently going that Nordic founders are focusing the most on.
That's a very interesting question, actually, because I think industry-wise, like I mentioned, that there's certain focus areas for different countries, and that, of course, is affected by many things. Like, say, for example, here in Finland and Estonia, defense technologies is very much on the rise because we have a very close, big neighbor here, and therefore we see the relevance more than some of our kind of more Western neighbors do see. But I think like when it comes to the values, something that I've been talking quite a lot about is that, especially in this time when, of course, the world is burning and there's war everywhere and so forth. So I would like to see the Nordic countries focus more and more on the climate solutions as well, because I feel that now with the defense technologies getting so much kind of bandwidth and so much budget, so much of the funding, which of course we see here as well, like said, but at the same time, the climate change and the climate kind of issues are a much bigger issue. So I think it has a kind of very good match with the Nordic mentality on appreciating the nature and valuing kind of the quality of life. That in that sense, I'm really hoping that that's going to be one of the next growing areas, because we do see that, for example, Norway has already been very focused on clean energy, and Finland is really quickly also kind of catching up on that as well, that there's a lot of different startups focusing on these like clean energy solutions and different kinds of clean tech solutions in general. So hopefully that's going to be kind of the future thing where people are focusing on. AI obviously will be a very integral part of all of this, and that's why it's great to have Sweden leading that. We'll definitely see more and more AI unicorns coming from here, from different kinds of angles, and kind of the big transformation coming from this region. Then one of the things which I don't think that is very Nordic either, just or like only specific to Nordics, is that one of the kind of the new trends that we see is definitely coming from the Silicon Valley side or from the global scene, that especially for younger people, younger founders, the kind of the grind culture or the crunch culture is very much back, that people are kind of putting in insane amounts of hours and kind of putting everything in life aside and then focusing on building the businesses, which of course kind of the founder life is very intense. It's very understandable. But at the same time, from the resilience angle, we do see it on a more generic level that it's very relevant for the founders as well to have something else in their lives, that they're much better founders if they also have something else in their lives. So hopefully the grind culture is not coming back at full speed, and hopefully we'll focus more on solving the big problems of our time.
Great. Okay, so like we talked about the trends and what the funders are lately like focusing the most. You already said about the climate projects, but some people needs more help, and I want to dive deeper a little bit into the Northern Light program. You already said one sentence about that, but we can expand it. I know that it's gonna be next week, the last week of applications being open. So could you tell us a little bit more about this initiative and who should apply to that program? If
Absolutely.
someone from Poland or our other viewers are interested to grow more into the Nordic sector, so let's hear more about that.
Yes, absolutely. So the Northern Light Accelerator is a fairly new program that we're running. We started it last year with the idea that many people reached out to us and asked, like, kind of, why are we not founding a program of our own to actually kind of collaborate more with international startup founders and helping international startup founders to the Nordic market. And that was something that then we started like thinking about that, how should we do this? What kind of a program should it be? And then of course, with the idea that if we start building something, it has to be something at a global level. So the ambition level needs to be high enough that we're not just building another Finnish accelerator that is only serving the Finnish entrepreneurs. So therefore, we chose kind of two main angles for the whole program. So the two main topics, kind of what this program is kind of focusing on is, as I was mentioning, it's finding the product market fit in the Nordic market or on the wider European market, depending a bit on where the companies are coming from. But then the other angle is exactly founder resilience, that how do we create founders? How do we support the founders in actually building the kind of resilience in them that they need to actually build sustainable companies? Because founder is really the founder is the key resource for the company to succeed. Even if you have a good product, if the founder burns out and kind of is not able to continue, then the company will go down as well. Mm-hmm. And we believe that while you can't reduce the amount of working hours necessarily, but you can have a lot more tools that are helping you to actually kind of cope with the pressure that comes in. And when it comes to kind of who should apply, so we basically look at companies that have at least one non-Finnish founder. So in some of the cases, we've had startups join that are already in Finland, but they have non-Finnish people in their teams. But most of the companies are coming from outside of Finland to begin with. So in those cases, obviously, all of the founders are from somewhere else. The companies should already have a first version of their product, so an MVP level product. They don't need to have customers necessarily and no need to have traction yet, but that of course helps because typically you're opening new markets at the point when you already have some traction on your home market as well. So it's easier to find the product market in the new market if you already have some traction on a home market. And then of course, I mean, goes without saying that they should have a scalable product and some kind of an interest in the Nordic region, or kind of why would they want to expand here in particular. So often we've seen that, for example, this has been something that startups have been interested in because they, for example, focus on some education platforms. Finland is very known for our educational system. So then they want to come here. We've had quantum startups. We've had startups that see a lot of potential in, for example, the sustainability aspects in the Nordics and so forth. So it depends a bit on the industry. All industries are very welcome. But typically there should be like some kind of an interest towards expanding to the Nordic region. But it's a very exciting 3-month program, and we're very hands-on helping the startups to actually get a foothold here. And we've been getting some really great results. So, for example, in our first batch last autumn, straight away, there was one Indian founder that was able to close 27 customers during the whole kind of program here as well. So it was an amazing result. And also we've been able to find a very stellar person to lead it. So we have Marianne, who's leading the program. So she is a former founder herself. She's been raising funding from Sequoia as well, among others. So she has kind of first-hand experience on growing a business outside of Finland. She's half English, half Finnish, and she grew her business in Hong Kong. So in that sense, there's a lot of very interesting things that I think we could offer for the Polish startups as well. So if there's anyone listening who would be interested, please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, we're of course gonna leave the link to the website with the program in the comment section under this post, so people will be able to find out more about the Northern Line. Even though you already explained it super nicely, if I would have a product myself, I would definitely apply, but sadly I don't have it. I'm just like helping others develop their own projects. So, but maybe one day, seriously.
We'll keep you in mind.
I don't know. I'm too busy to start thinking about something else. But I'm taking care of other startups, but not on myself. This is kind of crazy. But we're not here about. We're not here to talk about that. But thank you so much about letting us know about the Northern Light program, and moving back a little bit into like being open internationally. Do you have like any tips and I don't know, let's say tips and tricks for startups who want to enter the Nordic ecosystem? How can they make the most out of this experience?
That's also a very, very good question. I think when it comes to entering any international market, so one of the relevant things is to do your homework. I've done a lot of market entries myself, mostly in the Spanish and Portuguese speaking world. And I think it's very often the case that your product as it is right now, it's not directly applicable in the new market. You have to find a way to either edit it slightly, or in the best of cases, of course, just marketing it differently. But you have to find the arguments that kind of what is the way of talking about your product here and figuring out that is your product actually solving the same problem here that you think it's solving back home. So in that sense, I think the Nordics are not very different. What is relevant in the Nordics is that it's very trust-based, as you said before as well. So that trust needs to be earned, and often it helps if you have like a local counterpart helping you to actually build that trust. Up until you get the first reference customers that people know here, then you're kind of still relying on borrowing the credibility from someone else in kind of the ecosystem. So that's exactly, for example, what we do. In the case I mentioned, that Indian entrepreneur who closed 27 customers during the program here. So one of the things that we, for example, did with him was that I introduced him to some of his Finnish prospects in Finnish at first, then swapping into English midway. And that was a kind of enough to open doors for him, even though I didn't know those people either that we were reaching out to. So I think in that sense, whenever there's startups that are expanding to the Nordic market, it's good to keep in mind that you might want to find a local partner. And there's similar hubs like Maria01 in all the Nordic countries as well. So if there's a specific interest in, say, Norway or Sweden or whichever other market, so there's a lot of places where you can ask for help.
Great, that's a really great tip. Seriously, guys, like whenever, like, you know, we still like in Europe, but you know, each country has completely different way of work that we already found out during this interview. But it's a really great tip. So just to understand if, for example, your product actually gonna suit other market, and that's exactly how you said it. Do your homework, guys. And because we're getting super close to the end, before I'm gonna say goodbye to you, even though I don't want to, because seriously, I feel like we could talk for hours basically about it. But I have last question for like to sum up our quick chat and talk a little bit more about the future of Europe and innovation and innovations here. What excites you the most about the future of the Nordic startup ecosystem?
Wow, that's a big question. I think that this is only the beginning. We are kind of, even though the ecosystems in some of the places have been maturing and so forth, but I think we have so much more to give for the world, but for Europe in particular. So I think Europe is at this tipping point now that we kind of have relied too much on continents around us, and right now we are at a point when we really have to start building our own solutions to and kind of the focus on our own kind of value basis as well when we build the company. So I think this is an amazing opportunity for all of us in Europe, and I really hope that Nordics is going to kind of prove time and time again that we are able to generate some of the best companies in the world. And when there are people who are saying that Europeans can't compete with the Americans, for example, I really don't think that we have any basis to believe that. I think we have amazing talent in Europe in general. So hoping to see a lot of those companies coming from the Nordic region, and then of course from Eastern Europe as well, from Poland, and all of us collaborating a lot more together with kind of each one of us, and then focusing on building something great in Europe.
We're gonna conquer the world. I can feel that, seriously. Well, Sarita, thank you so much for, as I said, like really short interview, but still I hope that people gonna get the best out of it. I had so much fun talking to you, and it's so nice to meet you, and I'm really willing to see each other more during, you know, other projects, not only the podcast, but who knows, maybe doing some stuff together, connecting Poland to Finland more. Thank you. that was really amazing, and hope to see you soon. So guys, check out the comment box, of course, and learn more about the Nordic Light program. And thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.